Welcome, my dear guests, to the captivating expanses of my story. Chapter 13, 2211. Myra Gupta frowned at the holograms in front of her. The figures and statistics blurred before her tired eyes. She rubbed her temples and sighed softly. The last few Senate meetings had been burdensome, with every proposal endlessly discussed and debated. It was becoming increasingly difficult to gain the necessary majorities for important decisions. Myra stood in the center of one of the elegant conference rooms in the Senate building. The high polished marble walls reflected the subdued light of the holograms. A small group of senators had gathered around her, their faces reflecting the same mixture of frustration and determination she felt. The air crackled with suppressed energy. Senator Alexei Kuznetsov, a tall man with silver-gray temples, clenched his fists. "We can't go on like this," he growled, waving a hand through his hair violently. His voice echoed off the walls. "Every damn proposal, we have to deal with every single senator individually. It's wearing us down, taking up too much time and energy." Myra pressed her lips together and nodded in agreement. She felt the tension in her neck increase. "You speak from my soul, Alexei," she replied with a heavy sigh. "We urgently need to find a more efficient way of moving our ideas forward. Otherwise, we'll suffocate in bureaucracy and stagnation." In the silence that followed, Senator Ava Chen suddenly spoke up. The petite woman with the sharp features leaned forward, her dark eyes sparkling with barely restrained excitement. "Colleagues, what if we were to form an official faction?" she asked, her voice quivering. "A powerful group of like-minded people who stand united for progress and innovation? We could join forces and declare war on stagnation." The other senators looked at each other in surprise. Although the idea was new, it seemed intriguing. "That could work," Myra murmured thoughtfully. "A united front in the Senate, standing up for our common goals." The discussion became livelier, ideas flying back and forth. After an hour of intense debate, the name was decided: the Citizens' Elite Union. Myra felt her heartbeat accelerate. This was a decisive moment, the start of something big. The Citizen Elite Union would stand for progress, innovation, and the recognition of individual achievement. They would lead the empire into a new era of economic growth and technological advancement. "Our faction will be the voice of visionaries and pioneers," Myra declared firmly. "We will fight to ensure that every citizen has the opportunity to reach their full potential and be recognized for their achievements." The other senators nodded in agreement. They all sensed that this was a turning point. The formation of the Citizen Elite Union would fundamentally change the political landscape of Kasach. "By joining forces, we can achieve great things," Myra continued. "We will drive expansion into new systems, develop resources, and promote groundbreaking research. At the same time, we will ensure that every citizen benefits from this progress." The atmosphere in the room was electrifying. The senators sensed that they were part of something historic. The Citizens' Elite Union would form a counterweight to the conservative forces in the Senate and pave the way for bold new ideas. Myra looked into the determined faces of her fellow campaigners. She knew that the path would not be easy. But she felt real hope for the first time in a long time. With the Citizen Elite Union at her side, she would make her vision for Kasach a reality. Nadine Heimer sat in the conclave of the Helix, surrounded by the venerable members of the High Council of Genetic Guardians. The air was heavy with the scent of burning incense as they deliberated over the spiritual concerns of the people of Kasach. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door flew open, and a young novice rushed into the room, panting. "Dear Sister Nadine, sorry to disturb you," he shouted out of breath, his cheeks flushed from his hurried run through the sacred halls. "But there is news of the utmost urgency that cannot be delayed." Nadine frowned, a deep crease dug between her eyebrows. What could be so important as to interrupt the sacred deliberations of the conclave? The air in the room suddenly seemed to become even heavier, filled with an unspoken tension. With a curt gesture, she nodded to the novice to continue. "Almar Kazan has just announced in breaking news that a new faction has been formed in the Senate," the young man gushed, his words almost tumbling over each other. "The Citizen Elite Union, led by Myra Gupta." A murmur went through the assembly, and quiet voices rose like a swarm of startled insects. Nadine felt her stomach tighten as if she had been punched in the gut. Myra Gupta, of course. The ambitious sector governor had long been working to expand her influence in the Senate. She had apparently made her move skillfully and unexpectedly, like a predator leaping out of the shadows. What do we know about the aims of this faction? Nadine asked, weighing every word carefully. She forced herself to breathe calmly, keeping her voice even and composed. But inside her, a storm of worry and burgeoning anger was raging. They talk about progress, innovation, and individual recognition, the novice replied. They say they want to make the political processes in the Senate more efficient. Nadine pressed her lips together. Behind these euphonious words was undoubtedly an attempt to curtail the influence of the helix. She could feel the control of the initiative slipping away from her. We can't let that happen, she murmured, more to herself than the others. Then she looked up and let her gaze wander over the assembled members of the High Council. My brothers and sisters, we must act. And quickly. What do you propose, Sister Nadine? Asked one of the older councillors. Nadine stood up, her robes rustling softly. We need to form our faction. One that represents our values and beliefs in the Senate. One that will ensure that the genetic purity of our people and our sacred heritage are not sacrificed to a blind belief in progress. She began to pace up and down the room as the ideas shaped her mind. We need allies in the Senate. Senators who share our view or are at least open to it. We need to formulate a clear program that makes our goals clear. But how are we supposed to get it all together so quickly? A younger council member interjected. Nadine stopped and smiled grimly. By doing what we do best, working together. Each of us has contacts, skills, and resources. If we pool all that together, we can build a powerful faction quickly. She turned to the novice again. Go and bring me everything you can about this citizen elite union. Every detail could be important. The young man bowed hastily and hurried away. Nadine looked around. Time is of the essence, my friends. Let's not waste a minute. She already had an idea for a name. A name that would be useful to the conclave. Paulina Romero entered Senator Victor Volkov's sprawling estate. The old friend and longtime supporter of the Imperatrix welcomed her with a warm smile. They walked through the marble-paneled halls, past ancient artwork and holographic displays of Kostya's achievements. Nice to see you, Paulina, Victor greeted her warmly. Come on, let's go to the conservatory. The view of the gardens is magnificent at this time of year. They had barely settled into the comfortable armchairs when a holographic screen flickered in front of them, breaking the silence of the conservatory. Almar Kazan's familiar face materialized, his features marked by a mixture of seriousness and barely concealed excitement. The fine lines around his eyes betrayed the tension lurking behind his professional facade. Breaking news, Kazan announced in his characteristic deep voice, which sounded powerful and insistent even through the holographic transmission. A political earthquake has just occurred in the Imperial Senate. A new faction has been formed that could shake the power structure. Myra Gupta, known for her progressive and often controversial views, is the head of the so-called Citizen Elite Union. Paulina and Victor exchanged a meaningful glance in which surprise was mixed with a hint of concern. They knew Myra well enough to anticipate the far-reaching consequences of this bold move. The air in the conservatory suddenly seemed electrically charged. Clever, Victor murmured as he stroked his silver-gray beard thoughtfully. His eyes narrowed as he weighed up the implications. She's cleverly using the growing discontent in the Senate to create a powerful platform for her revolutionary ideas. A masterful move, I'll give her that. Paulina nodded in agreement, but her posture betrayed her inner tension. Myra has always been a visionary. There's no question about that. Her ability to inspire people and win them to her cause is impressive. She paused briefly, her voice taking on a worried undertone. But they're ambitious ideas of individual achievement and rapid progress at any cost. They could jeopardize the fragile stability for which we have fought and bled for years. The price could be too high. Victor leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed in the distance. We cannot allow the unity of our empire to splinter. The Imperatrix needs strong, united support, now more than ever. You're right, Paulina agreed. Her eyes flashed with determination. We have to act quickly. Victor reached for his communicator. I'll activate some contacts immediately, senators, military leaders, influential families, anyone who understands how important a strong, centralized throne is for our empire. Paulina nodded appreciatively. Good, I'll take care of the logistics. We need a place for a discreet meeting, perhaps the old military academy? Perfect, Victor agreed, his voice vibrating with suppressed excitement. "We'll create a counter-movement. A faction that will stand like a shield for the realm's unity and the throne's inviolable strength." Paulina felt energy pulsing through her body, electrifying every fiber. Her fingers twitched, ready to reach for the stars. This was the moment she had secretly been waiting for so long, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to observe the future of Kasach and to help shape and mold it actively. "What should we call ourselves?" she asked, her thoughts racing. She devised strategies and weighed up alliances. Plans were forming in her mind, merging into a complex network of possibilities and risks. Victor fell silent, his gaze directed into the distance. The silence weighed heavily on the room, interrupted only by the quiet humming of the holoscreens. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice firm and resolute. "The One Throne Followers. A name that clearly expresses our unwavering loyalty and our vision of a strong, united future." Paulina nodded in agreement, a grim smile playing around her lips. "It fits perfectly. Simple but powerful. A banner under which the true patriots of Kasach can rally." Rita Griffin stood on the bridge of the Ek Ibn Battuta, surrounded by flickering holograms. The blue lights of the senators hovered in front of her, their faces solemn and focused. They were heatedly discussing strategies for securing human dominance in the Kasach sector. "We must strengthen our position," Senator Weber urged, his voice crackling like static electricity through the transmission. The discoveries in the new systems could shift the balance of power in the entire sector. "We must not allow others to reap the fruits of our labor." Rita nodded in agreement, her bushy red hair bobbing slightly. "Our technology gives us an advantage, but we must not be lulled into a false sense of security. The frontiers of knowledge are constantly shifting, and we must remain vigilant." Suddenly, a new hologram flickered into existence, momentarily overlaying the others and bathing the room in a ghostly blue. Almar Kazan's face appeared, his eyes sparkling with excitement, the wrinkles around his mouth betraying the explosive nature of his message. "Breaking news," he announced, his sonorous voice echoing through the room. "The Citizen Elite Union has just been founded in the Imperial Senate. Myra Gupta, known for her visionary ideas, is head of this new faction. They promise to give greater recognition to the individual achievements of citizens." The words hung heavy in the air like thick clouds of fog. Rita felt her stomach tighten, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. She glanced around the holograms and saw the same apprehension on the faces of the others, their eyes widened, their lips pressed into thin lines. Senator Kurosagi broke the silence, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. "This will fundamentally shift the balance of power in the Senate. We cannot stand idly by while they gain the upper hand and undermine our position." Rita rubbed her chin thoughtfully, her fingertips brushing the rough skin of her lower jaw. Her mind worked at full speed, weighing up options and playing through scenarios as if she were analyzing a complex chess game. "We must act immediately," she finally said, her voice firm and determined. "If we hesitate, we will inevitably fall behind and lose influence." The holograms nodded in agreement, a synchronized flicker of assent. Senator Volkov leaned forward, his face filling a more significant part of the screen, every crease in his forehead visible. "What do you propose specifically, Minister Griffin?" "We need a clear plan of action." Rita took a deep breath, her chest visibly rising and falling. The moment she called for determination and visionary thinking. "We are forming our faction. One that will unequivocally champion the interests of humanity and ensure our dominance in the Kasach sector." "A bold move," murmured Senator Zhao, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "But possibly exactly the radical approach that the current situation requires." "What should we call this new faction?" asked Kurosagi, his voice vibrating with tension. Rita hesitated for just a heartbeat. "The Homo sapiens dominance. A name that clearly expresses our goals and leaves no doubt about our determination." The holograms hummed softly as the senators whispered amongst themselves, a jumble of hushed voices and whispered comments. Rita watched their reactions with eagle eyes, looking for the subtle signs of approval or disapproval in their faces and postures. Finally, Weber nodded slowly, his movement deliberate and weighed. "It's undoubtedly a bold move, but I agree. We must send a clear signal to consolidate our position and secure the future of humanity." The other senators agreed one by one. Rita felt the tension in her shoulders ease a little. They had found a way forward. "Good," she said, "then let's not waste any time. We need to work out our platform and gain allies. The future of Kasach is at stake. The holograms flickered as the senators prepared to leave. Rita knew the coming days would be hectic and challenging. But she was ready to take on the task. For the dominance of humanity. For the future of Kasach. The gentle late afternoon breeze swept through the lush gardens of the imperial palace, which sat majestically in the middle of the sprawling national park near Xanadu. Scifiaudiobook, the divine imperatrix of Kasach, strolled slowly through the ornate pathways, her steps weighed down by the weight of her thoughts. The recent political developments in the empire preoccupied her deeply. The formation of new factions in the imperial senate, the citizen elite union under Myra Gupta, the one-throne supporters of Paulina Romero and Viktor Volkov, and the Homo sapiens dominance of Rita Griffin, had shaken the political fabric of Kasach to its very foundations. Scifiaudiobook stopped before a magnificent fountain, its crystal-clear water glistening in the setting sun. She looked at her reflection on the water's surface, her features a mask of calm prudence that hid the storm within. The imperatrix recognized the opportunities and dangers these new factions brought with them. On the one hand, they could breathe fresh air into the political debates, introducing new ideas and perspectives that would advance the empire. On the other hand, there was a danger that in their eagerness to pursue their own goals, they could jeopardize the unity and stability of the empire. Scifiaudiobook turned away from the fountain and continued past artfully trimmed hedges and exotic flower beds. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers and the gentle buzzing of insects. But even the beauty and peace of the garden could not wholly dispel the heaviness of her thoughts. She had to find a way to channel these new political forces without suppressing them. She needed to harness their energies and ideas for the good of the empire without shaking the very pillars of Kasach's society, a delicate balance that would require all her political skill and wisdom. Scifiaudiobook reached a small hill from which she had a sweeping view over the garden and the wilderness of the national park beyond. In the distance, she could see the glittering towers of Xanadu, a symbol of her people's achievements and progress. Taking a deep breath, the imperatrix straightened her shoulders. She would find a way to deal with these new factions. She would utilize their strengths and compensate for their weaknesses to lead Kasach into an even brighter future. It would not be easy, but Scifiaudiobook was determined to rise to the challenge, for the good of her people and the empire she served. Scifiaudiobook turned to leave, ready to return to the palace. But as soon as she turned around, she caught sight of a familiar figure walking purposefully towards her. Her adopted daughter Nadine Heimer was striding along the gravel path with hurried steps, her simple robes rustling softly with every movement. "Mother," Nadine greeted when she reached Scifiaudiobook. Her voice sounded serious, almost solemn. "I need to speak to you urgently." Scifiaudiobook immediately sensed that there was something important in the air. She nodded curtly and pointed to a nearby stone bench. "Let's take a seat there, Nadine." "What's so important?" The two women settled down on the cool bench. Nadine took a deep breath before she began to speak. "I've made a decision, Mother. A decision that affects our empire and the Senate." Scifiaudiobook raised an eyebrow but waited patiently for Nadine to continue. "I will lead the conclave of exalted clerics in the Senate from now on," Nadine announced firmly. Her eyes searched Scifiaudiobook's gaze as if trying to read how her adoptive mother would react to this news. Scifiaudiobook felt her heartbeat quicken. The formation of this new faction was yet another change in Kasach's already turbulent political landscape. And now her daughter was at the head of one of these factions. "The conclave of exalted clerics," Scifiaudiobook repeated slowly, weighing every word. "What are the goals of this faction, Nadine?" Nadine straightened up, her posture taut and determined. "We will defend our realm's spiritual and conservative values, Mother. The essence of spirituality is the beating heart of our society. We must nurture and strengthen these sacred principles in all realm areas." Scifiaudiobook watched her adopted daughter closely. She recognized the zeal in Nadine's eyes, the conviction in her voice. It was clear that Nadine firmly believed in her cause. But at the same time, Scifiaudiobook also saw this new faction's challenges. "I understand," Scifiaudiobook finally said. She placed a hand on Nadine's arm, a gesture of affection and warning. "You have a great responsibility now, Nadine. Not just for your faction but for the entire realm. I hope you realize that." On February 11, 2211, the Ptolemy broke through hyperspace and glided into the Scifo system. Andrea Sauer stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the main screen. A red dwarf star shone faintly in the center of the system, orbited by 6 planets. "Scan the system," Andrea ordered, her voice tinged with the tension of discovery. Concentrate on the habitable zone. I want to capture every detail. Lieutenant Garcia nodded resolutely and activated the Ptolemy's susceptible sensors. A storm of data poured over the consoles, and numbers and diagrams flickered across the screens. Andrea leaned forward, her eyes darting over the results. Her gaze lingered on Scifo 3, a planet in the system's Goldilocks zone. Another bog world, she murmured, a mixture of fascination and caution in her voice. Interesting. And potentially dangerous. The Ptolemy glided majestically through space, cautiously approaching the third planet. Through the curved windows of the bridge, Scifo 3 shimmered in a spectrum of dark blues and greens, shrouded by swirling, dense bands of cloud that hid its surface like a mysterious veil. Prepare an exploratory probe, Andrea instructed Dr. Stern, her voice filled with scientific curiosity. I want detailed images of the surface. Pay particular attention to any signs of vegetation or geological anomalies. With a dull rumble, the probe shot out of the launch pad and accelerated rapidly towards the planet, a silver needle against the dark background of space. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Suddenly, the instruments flickered wildly, and alarms blared. Captain, we're detecting a massive anomaly, Lieutenant Tanaka reported, surprise and confusion in his voice. The probe. It's bouncing off. It's as if an invisible wall is throwing it back. Andrea frowned, her sharp mind immediately trying to comprehend the impossible. Bounce off? How is that possible? Show me the telemetry data, now. A fascinating spectacle appeared on the main screen. A shimmering energy field enveloped the entire planet like a second atmosphere, and the probe bounced off it like a rubber ball off a wall. It seems to be a protective shield, explained Dr. Stern, who analyzed the data. But none that we've ever seen. It blocks all matter and energy at high speed. Andrea watched as the probe made further unsuccessful attempts to penetrate the field. Each time, it was rejected as if it were nothing more than an annoying insect. Can we penetrate it with our sensors? She asked. Lieutenant Garcia shook his head. Negative, Captain. Our scans are also being deflected. Andrea stared at the enigmatic planet. An impenetrable shield that defied all known laws of physics. What was hiding behind it? Point all passive sensors at the field, she ordered. I want every fluctuation, no matter how small, recorded. Hours they were passed while the crew of the Ptolemy studied the mysterious shield. Occasionally, they caught fleeting images of the surface when the field fluctuated for fractions of a second. The images showed a world of endless moors and swamps. Thick clouds of mist wafted over the surface. Strange, bioluminescent plants glowed in the twilight. In the distance, crystalline formations rose from the mire, their peaks lost in the clouds. Andrea gazed at the fascinating images. They showed a moorland world protected by technology that surpassed anything known to mankind. Who created this shield, and why? A heated debate broke out in the magnificent hall of the Imperial Senate. The air crackled with tension as the representatives of the various factions presented their viewpoints on advancing the tradition of progress. Myra Gupta, the charismatic leader of the elite citizens' union, rose from her seat. Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as she presented her proposal. Honorable colleagues, she began in a firm voice, the time has come for us to usher in the era of innovation. Let's set this milestone as a development point for our empire. Her words electrified the room. Rita Griffin of the Homo sapiens dominance literally jumped up from her seat, even though this was only her hologram here in the Senate. Her bushy red hair vibrated excitedly while her eyes sparkled behind her trademark horn-rimmed glasses. Yes, this is just the move we need. She exclaimed enthusiastically, her voice echoing around the room. An era of innovation will catapult us to the forefront of galactic civilization. Imagine what we could achieve. But not everyone shared this enthusiasm. Nadine Heimer from the conclave of exalted clerics frowned. She rose slowly, her tall, ascetic figure towering over the other senators. Her short gray hair shimmered in the light of the holograms as she swept her gaze over the assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, she spoke calmly but insistent, we must not throw our traditions and values overboard lightly. Innovation is essential, but not at the cost of our spiritual foundations. Consider the consequences for our society, for our faith. Tension rose in the hall. Senators whispered excitedly. Glances flew back and forth. The decision seemed to be on a knife's edge. At that moment, all eyes turned to Paulina Romero, the leader of the One Throne supporters. She had remained silent until now, but now she stood up with the dignity of an experienced stateswoman. "Dear colleagues," she began, "we have heard the arguments. Let us now ask the Imperatrix for her wise assessment." A murmur went through the hall when Imperatrix Saviaheimer stood up. Her presence filled the room as she took the floor. "My loyal senators," she said clearly, "I have carefully weighed your arguments. Progress is the foundation of our empire, and innovation is the way forward. I therefore support the proposal of the Civic Elite Union." A collective sigh of relief went through the ranks of the Citizen Elite Union and the Homo sapiens dominants. Myra Gupta's round face beamed with satisfaction while Rita Griffin's hologram flickered excitedly. Nadine Heimer, on the other hand, pressed her lips together into a thin line, her ascetic features hardened. Savia continued, her piercing blue eyes sweeping the assembly, "However, we do not forget our roots and values. The era of innovation should move us forward without losing what makes us who we are. We must find a way to reconcile progress and tradition." With these words, the decision was made. The air in the chamber vibrated with tension. Most of the Senate, led by the BEU and supported by the HSD and the One Throne supporters, voted to introduce the era of innovation. Paulina Romero nodded in agreement, her military stance underlining the supporters' determination. Nadine Heimer and her supporters withdrew with petrified expressions while the rest of the Senate erupted in excited murmurs. Rita Griffin stood on the bridge of the Ek Ibn Battuta and watched the holographic representation of the excavation site on Scifiaudiobook. The three-dimensional projection showed a complex network of building remains, streets, and squares stretching across the moon's surface. "Fascinating," Rita murmured as she adjusted her glasses. "Dr. Chen, what do you have for me?" Dr. Lian Chen, the mission's lead archaeologist, stepped beside her. "Minister Griffin, our recent findings confirm our theories about the significance of this site. It was a hub for trade and diplomacy between the Nine Ardians and the natives of the moon." Rita nodded appreciatively. "Tell me more about those energy credits you mentioned." Chen activated another hologram that showed a series of shimmering, crystal-like objects. "These artifacts are truly remarkable. They are some ancient currencies that we have found in various buildings and warehouses. Our analyses indicate that they can store and transfer energy." Rita's eyes widened. "An energy currency? That's revolutionary." "Indeed," Chen agreed. "These credits shed new light on the economic and cultural relations between the Nine Ardians and the Aborigines. It seems they have established a sophisticated system of energy trade." Rita turned to her first officer, Commander Yuki Tanaka. "Tanaka, I want you to assemble a team to ensure the safety of these energy credits. We must get them to Kosh intact." Tanaka saluted curtly. "Understood, Minister. I will select the best security experts on the crew immediately." Rita turned back to the hologram and studied the complex structures of the ancient city. "Dr. Chen, what can you tell me about the architecture? Are there any clues to the nature of their negotiations?" Chen zoomed in on a large, circular plaza in the center of the ruins. "This area appears to have been a central meeting place. The arrangement of the buildings suggests some arena for debates or negotiations." Interestingly, we found that Rita stroked her chin thoughtfully. "So a link between diplomacy and energy trading. Fascinating. Discovery of the energy credits on Scifiaudiobook. Overview. Location, excavation site on Scifiaudiobook. Discovered by Ek Ibn Battuta research team led by Dr. Lian Chen. Supervised by Research Minister Rita Griffin. Description of the energy credits. Crystal-like objects have the highest concentration of energy credits here. Function, storage and transmission of energy. Presumed use as currency in interstellar trade. Significance of the discovery. 1. Evidence of advanced energy trade between Nine Ardians and Aborigines. 2. New insights into economic and cultural relationships of past civilizations. 3. Potential implications for understanding ancient technologies and energy systems. Archaeological context. Found in various buildings and warehouses at the excavation site. Highest concentration in a central, arena-like structure. Evidence of the link between diplomacy and energy trade. Next steps. 1. Securing and transporting the energy credits to Kasach. 2. Detailed analysis of the technology and possible applications. 3. Further exploration of the excavation site to gain additional insights. Potential impact. Reassessment of the technological capabilities of ancient civilizations. Possible applications in modern energy systems. Deeper understanding of interstellar relationships in the past. Rita's mind raced as she weighed the implications of this discovery. Not only could the energy credits revolutionize her understanding of the past, but they could also have implications for Kasach's future. She had to tread carefully to realize the full potential of this discovery. Dr. Chen, she said firmly, I want you to focus your investigation on the technology behind these energy credits. If we can understand how they work, it could considerably impact our energy systems. Chen nodded eagerly. Of course, Minister. I'll get a specialized team together right away. Rita turned back to the main screen, which showed the surface of Siddha's Iva. The ruins stretched across the horizon like an ancient promise. She couldn't help but wonder what other secrets this moon would reveal. The news of the discovery in orbit around Bonawariak 1 spread like wildfire through the corridors of the Ek equinox. Dr. Chao-Si-Ku-Uba stood motionless in front of the bridge's main screen, her eyes fixed on the image of the lifeless creature hovering before them. The beast, whose form defied any known classification, hung motionless in the vacuum of space. Impossible, murmured Uba, her voice barely more than a whisper. That contradicts everything we know. A commotion broke out around them. Scientists heatedly debated possible explanations while technicians frantically tried to gather more data. The air crackled with excitement and confusion. Lieutenant Mariana Martin watched the scene with growing concern. Her eyes followed Dr. Uba, whose normally calm hands now shook uncontrollably. The renowned exobiologist looked shaken as she turned away abruptly and left the bridge with hurried steps. Dr. Uba. Wait. Martin called after her. But her words went unheard in the chaos of excited voices and the beeping of the sensors. Martin tried to follow her but was stopped by a technician who was urgently demanding her attention. The hours crept by, and the tension on board the Equinox grew unbearable. Wild theories were put forward in the laboratories and meeting rooms, only to be picked apart again shortly afterward. Fierce debates broke out between the various departments, and the scientists' voices were excitedly raised. Some biologists saw the mysterious discovery as the long-awaited proof of complex extraterrestrial life. Others, especially from the Department of Astrophysics, argued vehemently for a previously unknown natural phenomenon. The corridors buzzed with speculation while the crew vacillated between euphoria and fear. Mariana Martin stood before Dr. Uba's cabin door, her heart pounding restlessly. She raised her hand for the third time and knocked vigorously. Dr. Uba? Please, open the door. We need to talk. Silence answered her. An icy shiver ran down her spine as her fears intensified. In a strained voice, she turned to the ship's computers. Computer, initiate emergency override of Dr. Chao-Si-Ku-Uba's cabin door. Authorization, Martin, Mariana, Lieutenant. The door slid open, and Martin's breath hitched. Dr. Uba lay motionless on the floor of her cabin, surrounded by data pads and holographic projections of the mysterious creature. Emergency medical team to Dr. Uba's cabin, now. Martin barked into her communicator. The next few minutes flew by. The medical team arrived and worked feverishly, but in the end, they could only determine death. Dr. Chao-Si-Ku-Uba, the brilliant exobiologist and chief scientist of the Ek equinox, was no more. The news of Dr. Uba's death left the entire crew in shock. Speculation did the rounds. Was it stress? An undiscovered medical problem? Or had the discovery plunged her into a deep crisis of faith that she couldn't cope with? A message from Imperial Command arrived in the midst of the chaos. Mariana Martin was summoned to the communications room. Lieutenant Martin, Admiral Romero's voice sounded serious. In light of the extraordinary circumstances and the tragic loss of Dr. Uba, we, with this, appoint you temporary commander of the Ek equinox. Your primary task is to restore order and continue the investigation into the discovery. Understood? Martin swallowed hard. Understood, Admiral. As she left the communications room, the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. The Ek equinox was in turmoil, her predecessor was dead, and a mystery hovered before them that challenged everything they thought they knew. Rita Griffin entered the Imperial Senate with firm steps. Her bushy red hair and characteristic horn-rimmed glasses made her stand out. She held a data crystal in her hands containing the results of years of research. The tension in the room was palpable. "Honorable Senators," Rita began, her voice clear and confident. However, a slight tremor in her fingers betrayed her inner tension. "I stand before you today to announce the successful completion of our research into carrier operations. Years of hard work have led to this breakthrough." A murmur went through the ranks. Senator Myra Gupta leaned forward with interest, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Nadine Heimer, on the other hand, narrowed her eyes skeptically, her lips pressed into a thin line. Rita activated a hologram that showed an imposing starbase. The bluish light of the projection bathed the room in an unreal glow. "This technology will revolutionize our interstellar travel. Just imagine hangar facilities on starbases that can house fleets of space superiority fighters. A network of these bases could protect our empire like never before." The projection switched to a sleek spacefighter. The elegant, deadly design had some senators nodding in admiration. "These ships are faster, agile, and deadlier than anything we've had before. They will strengthen our defenses and ensure our expansion. Imagine these fighters exploring alien systems, opening up new worlds for us." Paulina Romero, the fleet admiral, nodded approvingly. Her eyes sparkled with strategic interest. "How long until we have the first units ready for deployment?" she asked, her voice tinged with military precision. "With your approval, we can put the first squadron into service within 6 months, Rita replied. She involuntarily tightened her posture under Romero's scrutinizing gaze. Imperatrix Savia Heimer rose from her throne, her magnificent robe glittering in the light of the holograms. "Senator Voss, what economic effects do you expect?" she asked calmly but authoritatively. The man she addressed cleared his throat and stroked his beard nervously. "The initial costs are high, Your Highness. However, in the long term, this technology will consolidate our position in the sector and open up new trading opportunities. We are often discussing potential profits that could exceed our investment." Rita could feel the mood in the room change. The initial skepticism increasingly gave way to cautious enthusiasm. Low murmurs filled the room as the senators discussed among themselves. "Think of the possibilities," she continued, her voice carried with passion. "We could open up previously unreachable systems, discover new resources, and extend our influence far beyond known borders. Imagine Kasach as the center of an interstellar trading empire." Nadine Heimer spoke up, her ascetic figure radiating calm. "And what about the risks? Couldn't this technology fall into the wrong hands? We mustn't ignore the moral implications." Rita nodded gravely. "A legitimate concern, Senator. That's why we're proposing strict security protocols. The plans and construction will only occur in our most secure facilities." The debate swayed back and forth. Senators heatedly discussed the pros and cons while Rita patiently answered every question. She sensed that the decisive moment was approaching. Finally, Imperatrix Savia rose again. The room fell silent instantly. "We have heard the arguments and weighed the options," she announced. "It is time for a decision that will shape the fate of our empire." Rita held her breath. Everything depended on the following words. "Hey, I would be happy if you could give my video a like, leave a comment and subscribe to my channel to stay up to date."